Council of the MATCVS for this most kind and thoughtful gesture in inviting me to speak in remembrance of a dear friend and colleague and an esteemed member of our surgical fraternity. Dr. Balaji Badmanaban passed on tragically, unexpectedly, and suddenly about 3.5 months ago on the 6th of June, just a week after his 54th birthday. We have in the audience today his wife, Dr. Mugil, and his young daughter, Soundria, and I'm honored and privileged to say a few words about him and his clinical work. I first met Dr. Bala in Dublin, Ireland, believe it or not, over 30 years ago, in 1992. He was my senior in medical school, but our close personal and professional friendship only started some years later, in 1999, in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where we were junior surgeons in training. Balaji, or Bala, as many of us knew him, was born not far here in the state of Selangor, in the district hospital in Tanjung Kara, on the 30th of May 1969, just a fortnight after the infamous race riots, May 13th riots in Kuala Lumpur. Much of his early childhood and growing up was in Jerantu, a small town in the east coast state of Pahang, where both his parents worked as general practitioners. And later he moved over to Singapore to complete his secondary education at the United World College before leaving for the UK, where he boarded at the prestigious English public school, Sevenoaks. In 1988, he travelled across the Irish Sea to Dublin, Ireland, to read medicine at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and he graduated 6 years later in 1994. During his 6-year tenure in college, he distinguished himself as an academic high achiever, winning numerous honors and prizes. Upon graduation and his post-internship, he undertook his basic surgical training and then specifically his cardiothoracic surgical training at a number of leading hospitals, including the University Hospital in Cork and Harefield Hospital. But the bulk of his cardiothoracic training was undertaken at the renowned Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, Northern Ireland. As a dexterous, skillful, insightful, and diligent surgeon, it was no surprise that he sailed through his specialist registrar training and progressed quite rapidly from junior to middle grade to the grade of a senior registrar. And even back then, I remember Bala as someone who always demonstrated a keen interest and a passion in training and mentoring younger colleagues. In 2007, he sat and passed the Intercollegiate FRCS in Cardiothoracic Surgery. This is from the conjoint board of the 4 Royal Surgical Colleges of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Ireland, and England, and in doing so became one of the first local Malaysian surgeons to be conferred with this FRCS CTH. A couple of years later, he returned to Malaysia and took up a consultant post at Hospital Serda, where he practiced as a high-volume independent surgeon until he left for private practice in Klang. In July 2010, I returned from the UK and we were fortuitously reunited at Serda. And over the next couple of years, we set about developing the thoracic surgical service, which included establishing a weekly multidisciplinary tumor board meeting on a Monday, a dedicated thoracic surgical operating list on Fridays, and more widespread adoption of minimally invasive VATS surgery. Despite having a mixed practice of adult cardiac and general thoracic work and a high caseload of cardiac work, Bala had an obvious passion and, dare I say, flair in thoracic and pulmonary work. In fact, he often traveled up and down the country at his own expense and time to share on the services at Serda, the thoracic services, with our medical peers and colleagues in the smaller peripheral and district hospitals, imploring for early referral of appropriate cases. Medical education, be it bedside teaching of junior doctors or technical supervision in the operating theatre, was a genuine lifelong passion for Bala, and he did this well. And I witnessed this firsthand from the early days in Dublin through to Belfast during our time in Serda, and even more recently in his private work in Klang. I can assure all of you that there are a number of younger consultants practicing here today in Malaysia and in Northern Ireland who owe him a small debt of gratitude for his focused guidance and his robust training. In recent years, he developed other interests outside clinical cardiothoracic surgery, specifically in the areas of clinical governance and medical legal work. In fact, he chaired his hospital's M&M committee, and he worked very hard to change the tone and climate of that meeting from a typical defensive adversarial one into an educational environment. He would often say to me, we must learn from every single death or mishap or mortality and see what we can do better or differently to improve outcomes. With a growing seniority and a well-earned sensible reputation, Bala was increasingly sought to give medical legal opinions, which he did, but he proudly declared he would never give evidence against a colleague, testimony of his kind nature. Over the past decade, I witnessed his evolution and transformation from someone who was fully captivated and consumed by the art and science of our field of cardiothoracic surgery into a more wholesome being and a true family man. He read widely and constantly, varied genres, and he was very much a hands-on, devoted father, immensely proud of both his children, whom he spoke frequently about with much affection and pride. I will miss his gentle laughter, his witty humor, his endearing and engaging company. I will certainly miss the many chats we had when we shared personal and professional joys and stresses, and pertinently when we discussed complex cases and challenging patients. Humility and humor aside, his greatest virtue was his courage and conviction. Unperturbed, if his opinion was unpopular or singular, Bala would often unflinchingly speak up at any forum if he witnessed a perceived injustice or something, if he observed something to be illogical or unethical. Dr. Bala was a good man who helped and uplifted many on his brief journey. His was a life well lived and well served, albeit a short one. I had no doubt that the legacy of his good work will continue through the efforts of the many cardiothoracic surgeons he has helped guide and train, both here in Malaysia and elsewhere, as well as through his two lovely young children. He will be sorely missed by his family, friends, and the wider cardiothoracic community here in Malaysia. May he rest in peace. On that note, I would like to thank once again MATCVS for kindly acknowledging his untimely passing and his valuable contributions. And may I ask you all now to kindly join me in observing a minute's silence in tribute to and memory of our dear fallen colleague, the late Dr. Balaji Badmanaban. So perhaps we can observe that minute from now. If agreed, you let us know. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. To conclude this brief acknowledgement or remembrance moment, I'd like to now invite Dr. Bashir, President of MATCVS, to kindly come on stage and I believe present a small token to the late Dr. Bala's wife, Dr. Mugil, and Dr. Venugopal as well. Very senior respected surgeon who knew Dr. Balaji very well and often worked closely with him. So can we get Dr. Mogil, please? Mogil?